Hello and welcome back to Budget where today we'll be discussing the recent free points and rules updates for Age of Sigmar 3rd Edition. Alright, so in this video I wanted to follow up on my recent discussion on the new 2022 General's Handbook by reviewing the recent free pitch battle profiles and rules updates that are now available on Warhammer Community. Games Workshop has made good on their promise that the pitched battle profiles, aka the points, would remain free for Age of Sigmar, and for the first time to my knowledge, they've released all of the points in a free, well-organized PDF for you to download on their website. In the past, you could only find these points for free on either the app or on War Scroll Builder, but I haven't seen them before in an easy reference booklet unless you purchase the General's Handbook. Perhaps even more exciting is that they've done the same thing for 40K, which is the first time I've ever heard of points being free in 40K. Those are generally locked behind a paywall in the app or in your codex. So it's quite exciting and perhaps maybe a sign of GW moving in a more consumer-friendly direction, at least on this. Although I do still fear them locking the War Scrolls for Age of Sigmar behind a paywall sometime in the future. They remain free for now. GW also released another new Battlescroll update. In a minute, we'll go over what this is and what the Battlescroll updates are, but in a nutshell, they're free balance updates, also available in a PDF on the website. I've included links to download both the Battlescroll and the points for Age of Sigmar and 40K in the description down below if you're interested. And we'll discuss kind of what I think of the balance changes overall, as well as the points and what this may mean for the direction of the game and the hobby as a whole. Okay, so let's go over a couple of the specifics on the points changes. Biggest thing here is that the 3rd edition battle tomes have seen no changes across the board. GW appears to have opted to instead address some of the issues with the 3rd edition battle tomes armies through nerfs and buffs in the Battlescroll updates, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Endless spells have seen some adjustments across the board. Many of the more popular endless spells, such as Emerald Life Swarm or Emerald Umbral Spell Portal, remain unchanged. Cogs are 5 points cheaper, for example, and many of the less popular faction-specific spells are way down, up to 30 or more points in some cases. And while we're not going to go through every faction or unit, there are a lot of great videos and blogs available on that if you're more interested in the competitive scene, but I just wanted to go over a few highlights I've noted. The Gotrek's up by 50 points. He's pretty strong model, not as strong on the competitive scene as there are ways to play around him, but now nearly 500 points. A little bit of a budget aside, if you're looking for a cheap way to expand your army to 2,000 points and you play Order, now he's nearly a quarter of a 2,000 point list for 35 bucks. So that's something to think about. The Lord of Change is down 20 points in Zinj, perhaps to be more competitive versus Cairo. Sentinels, interestingly, are still 170 points. I think a lot of people are expecting those to be further nerfed, and they were not. Slanesh and Khorne have seen some significant point drops. Bloodletters are down 20 points. Slaughter Priests are down 10 points. That Keeper of Secrets is down 20 points. Demonettes are down 10. Blissbarb Archers are down 40. Good stuff there. Slaves to Darkness and Gits, interestingly, are unchanged. I suspect this is because they likely will be receiving new battle tomes, and Games Workshop didn't see the point in going to the effort to adjust them now, which it makes sense. Slaves to Darkness has been confirmed for later this year, and Gits is highly expected. Archeon, Teclis, Kragnos, and Nagash, and a lot of the big boys, as I like to call them, Marathi 2, given that Daughters of Cain have a recent battle tome, are all unchanged. Okay, so next we'll talk about Battlescroll Gallet. What are the battle scrolls? They're free updates to the rules, generally balance changes per matched play that are released on the Warhammer community website. They are free. They're available in a PDF, which, as I mentioned, will be in the description below. And they come along with all the other rules updates that GW puts out in different places. And this would be my one critique of the Battlescroll system, is it's one in a number of places that they change the rules, and it can be very hard to keep track of all the rules updates. It comes along with errata, White Dwarf updates, and then of course new rules from Battle Tome, supplemental materials, and eventually new additions, of course. It can be kind of overwhelming, especially if you're new to the hobby or even if you're not, to try and find everything and keep up with all of this as frequently as the rules are changing. I think it's good that they're being mindful of the balance of the game, but can be difficult to keep up with and find. I haven't found an easy way to quickly see, okay, what are the most recent updates to the rules. Another thing that it didn't make entirely clear in the new PDF, but was mentioned in the blog post, is that this replaces the last battle scroll. The hunt is gone. The hunt was a battle scroll released in March that introduced priority targets and prime hunters. Essentially what that was, if you're not familiar with it, is very powerful units such as Sentinels, Stormdrake Guard were marked as priority targets, meaning if you killed them, you would get extra points. And then weaker armies were given the prime hunters tagline, such as, I believe, bone splitters. And they would get even more points for taking out these units. It was a nice idea for balance, but I think added more bookkeeping to the game, and I'm kind of glad to see them have just gone for more straightforward nerfs and buffs in this edition and do away with the extra bookkeeping. As I mentioned, generally these balance changes are straightforward and well appreciated, so let's dive into what they actually are. Okay, so starting off with order, most of the changes to order are nerfs targeted at Stormcast. The biggest one, of course, being Stormdrake Guard, as many expected have lost their out-of-phase charge and move. This was the ability called Draconic Onslaught that let them do these things during the hero phase. It is no more. Now they get a reroll one charge once per game. So pretty huge nerf for them. Points, of course, remain the same. We'll see how strong they are after this nerf, but I think it's an appropriate change. Thunderstrike, Volley, another out of phase ability has been nerfed. Now this special command ability can only be given to non-reinforced shooting units, which can reduce the damage output from using this command ability, especially on things like Vanguard Raptors, a huge unit adjudicators, things like that. Cities of Sigmar Living City had a rules rewrite to make a command ability function more as intended. They have an ability called Strike Then Melt Away. Essentially, after a unit shoots, it can make a movement. And the idea was that you'd shoot and then you'd move your shooting unit away to have it more protected. They've reworded the ability so that you actually have to move away now, or at least you have to end your move 9 inches or more away from all enemies. I believe that this ability was being used with things like Stormdrake Guard, which of course can be coalition units in Living City. And then you do your breath attack, and then you move your dragons closer to the enemy after they've already done their other movement shenanigans. So that's gone now. Seraphon has seen a small nerf to Scaly Skin. The damage reduction from this and the Coalesced subfaction only applies to Saurus, Croxagora monsters, so it no longer applies to Skink screens. But don't feel too bad for the Skinks because they won the Golden Demon this year with this beautiful model by Gavin Garza on the right. So we still love you. Okay, next we'll discuss Chaos, and the biggest thing here is that Be'lakor in Legion of the First Prince has been nerfed pretty significantly. He has lost his ability to reroll all hit and wound rolls when he has one of his battle line demons, meaning demonettes, horrors, bloodletters, plague bearers nearby. And now he just gets a flat +1 bonus to hit and bonus to wound if they're within range. And he also loses the bodyguard functionality, meaning he can no longer shunt wounds from himself onto these units, which is pretty huge. Makes him a lot more killable in these matchups. Khorne has seen some much needed buffs and a kind of a common sense thing. It used to be with Blood for the Blood God and your summoning that if you spent any points, you didn't get to keep whatever was left over, it just went to 0. Now it just works in a much more straightforward way. If you spend some blood tithe points, you get to keep the rest. You can spend them later. Simple but elegant buff to Khorne, which I think will be much appreciated. Slanesh, I'm sure, will take pleasure in them reiterating the point drop for things like particularly Blissbarb Archers, which have gone down from 180 to 140, a 40-point decrease. They put this in here because they didn't include it when they originally printed the points changes, but they have included these updates in the PDF version, which is available for free. Pretty straightforward changes for death. Flesh Eater Quartz now just gets a flat 6-up ward army-wide, no more constraints on that. And Ossiarch Bone Reapers, kind of nice change. They get some more conditional battle line units in the Necropolis Stalkers and a Mortis Guard, which are both treated as battle line now if a Mortisan is your general. Okay, saving the best for last, let's talk about destruction. The Cruel Boys have seen some buffs. No points decreases as many were hoping for, but Hobgrots are finally battle line with a condition. For every 1 unit of Gut Rippers you can take 1 unit of Hobgrots as battle line. And I think this gives the army so much more flexibility. It strengthens the Hobgrots, which are already a pretty good screen, to be honest. I think a lot of people are sleeping a little bit on the poor Hobgrots. But this gives them a lot more utility, lets you lighten up the points you're investing in battle line to put in other places in your list if you want. And in an army that only by default has 1 option for battle line, 2 if you play in the Big Yeller subfaction, it's nice to see another conditional battle line option. Speaking of subfactions, the Grin and Blade subfaction is now much better. The subfaction ability used to be you got 12 inches of invisibility, meaning enemies can only target you if they're 12 inches or closer for the first round. Now it's all game. So that's pretty big against shooting heavy armies. It gives you a lot more survivability for quite a fragile army against artillery, sentinels, you name it. And a much more compelling reason to play something other than Big Yellers. Bone Splitter's got a pretty cool buff that I think is maybe a little more powerful than it might first appear. So they have an allegiance ability that gives them exploding 6s, meaning if you roll a 6 to hit, you then roll 2 dice to wound and then count both if they wound. This used to be on units of 5 or more. Now it's on everybody. So that means it's on your heroes, it's on your big stabbas. Everything in the army is getting this. And then if you mix it in with Icebone, I believe it is, whose subfaction ability is that 6s to wound, do mortal wounds, suddenly that mortal wound potential is going quite a bit up when you can run multiple like savage big bosses, which are quite cheap but are pumping out quite a number of attacks. They're getting these exploding 6s now. So you know, this could be a pretty big deal for them, and it's nice to see because Bone Splitters don't see a ton of play, and they're quite a fun army. Lastly, Gloomspite gets gotten some buffs to how the Bad Moon buffs work. Notably in the Moon Clan, instead of re-rolling 1s, they now get a 4-up rally if they're under the light of the Bad Moon. What does this mean? If you use the rally command ability, then instead of bringing back models when you roll a 6, it's models back on a 4-up. So a 50-50 chance to bring your stabbers back to life, and in a horde style army that can really start to add up. So this is pretty good. Next, any Troggoth units, instead of in the past when they were under the light of the Bad Moon, they could re-roll their regeneration roll. Now they just get a flat +1 save. It's simpler, it's better, I like it. And then lastly, one problem with Gloomspite gets is how much of a slot machine the Bad Moon buffs are, and some of them weren't very good, which is being addressed. But now your Loon Shrine gives a 12-inch Bad Moon aura for the whole game, or until it's destroyed by somebody. So you can at least guarantee that in a certain radius you're going to get these buffs, and that's good. It's nice to see some more control for the army. So overall, I think that these changes are quite good. I appreciate free content from Games Workshop. It's nice to see that there's free points in one PDF, and really exciting to see that they actually do this for 40K too. My one fear is it's unclear if the War Scrolls for Age of Sigmar may be paywalled in the app in the future. We will see. I hope they remain free. This was one of the big selling points for Age of Sigmar back in the day, but we'll see what happens. The balance changes are straightforward. I think they minimize bookkeeping, and they're all kind of common sense changes. I don't have a problem with any of them, which is nice. Then lastly, more casual players, as I mentioned in my last video, you can use these rules to continue playing, and if you don't really care about the other stuff, you don't necessarily need to pay the $55 a month for the General's Handbook every 6 months. You can still get these kind of rules updates and the points updates for free. Play narrative, play open, play matched with a different set of match play battle tactics. Um, all good stuff. So anyway, I wanted to thank you all for watching, and we recently hit 100 subscribers on the channel, so I just wanted to, just for this first 100, thank the first folks who subscribed to me. So a big thank you to Iluna Chen, Kabahene, Manuel Clemen, Andre Negroni, Kamelkian, Alpha Ray, Ian F, Q Chan, Amukasa, Eric Martin, JJ, RG5, Rico, Robert Thurman, The Insomniac 91, Joshua Howard, Michael Jacobs, Felipe Gajardo, Zachary Jobin, Giorgio Fava, Jamie Mena, Frosby, Christopher Monahan, William, the student, 52, Michael Sewell, Jupiter Atreides, The Miswicks, Mantart, Juan David Andian Gonzalez, Ciro Goya, Ben Loma, Jay Brunner, Dorkin Moore, Robin Mankiller, Matt Stoltman, So Jungmin, and G Stargrave. And also the 63 other of you whose subs were either set to private or YouTube just isn't showing me you for some reason. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned. We'll have another tier list on the way shortly, this time a little bit of a spookier kind of theme. Anyway, thanks for watching as always, and take good care.